Hey there, we're back for another one of our Lunch and Learn series shows. Today we're talking about a restricted appraisal report. What is a restricted report? So, the USPAP, which is the series of rules or guidelines that professional appraisers are supposed to follow, outlines two very specific options when it comes to creating any kind of written appraisal report. There's the standard appraisal report, and I put in brackets there narrative because you'll often see that word used in a lot of appraisal documents. And then there's something called a restricted report, which has more controls over who can use it and how it can be used. And it's very important in the world of machinery and equipment appraisal. And I'm going to get into that in today's video. So, because if you've ever received a report from us, there's a sample of one right there. The very first word in that title is restricted. It's a restricted appraisal report. And all of the reports that we do on machinery and equipment are restricted. So I'm going to get into the details of why that is, how it is, and in what way they're different from what you might be used to. So, for example, a standard appraisal report would contain full narration of the process of the appraisal. It will have comparables that are included there for the reader to look at, and the process and logic behind the appraisal is demonstrated in the report. And if you would like to see an example of this, all you need to do is reach for a real estate appraisal, because you will find if you have a house or a building being appraised, that the appraiser doing that will include all kinds of information about past sale transactions. They'll have photos of comparable pieces of real estate. They'll have maps showing where those different buildings are located. They'll have a whole process and logic about how they determined, the weighting of different methodologies of evaluation, income method versus market value, et cetera. And they'll show how they considered them and how they came to their final number. So it's a very detailed process. And if you're going to be looking at something like a building, you want to know as precisely as possible, like how the number came to be. Now, let's compare that with the typical machinery and equipment appraisal, because in our world, we are dealing with often lists of equipment. So, oftentimes, when somebody will call us to inquire about having a machinery and equipment appraisal done, we can't tell them what it's going to cost or give them an estimate until we've seen a list of the equipment. And the very first thing I say to most people is, you are not engaging us to do an appraisal. You are engaging us to do 10 to 100 appraisals. And it's very common for us to go into a mid market size company and end up with an appraisal that outlines 300 items. We've done those before. For a small business, a little restaurant or something like that, we can still easily end up with dozens of what we refer to as capital items. So when we're doing machinery and equipment appraisals, we divide the items in the business between two categories, the capital items and the small equipment. We'll talk more about small equipment in another Lunch and Learn video. But if you would imagine us creating the full narrative for every one of these capital items. In this example here, this is for a small pub, and they have 17 capital items listed there. If we were to include in the report comparable transactions, photographs, details of every other transaction or item listed for sale or offered for sale that was similar to the item being examined, we would very quickly end up with reports of hundreds or thousands of pages. And this simply isn't viable or cost effective in any way for any of the parties involved in these transactions. And so, this is why machinery and equipment appraisal reports are typically issued as restricted. And this is a little snippet from within the report where it simply says results of analysis of subject sales, offers, options, and listings. It says details are maintained in the appraiser's files. And so we, as a certified appraisers, have a duty to maintain this information should the report ever be put under scrutiny and we have to defend the value. So I talk a lot in these videos about how our only duty or obligation is to defensible values. And that duty and obligation carries forward into the future, oftentimes years into the future. And sometimes we have to answer a question about an appraisal report that we did many years earlier. And so we have to be good custodians of that information for all of our clients. So there are other conditions that are placed upon these restricted reports by USPAP because they don't contain the full depth of information that a standard appraisal report or narrative appraisal report would contain. So, because of the lack of in depth narrative, USPAP requires that these reports have only one specified user, which means that when we get hired to create a report for a specific bank because someone's trying to get a loan to refinance equipment, for example, the report is written for that one bank and is that one bank's property. What does this mean? Well, it means that there's no such thing as a transmittal letter for machinery and equipment appraisals. So if somebody is getting an appraisal for Bank A, and then they decide, you know what, I want to actually get a loan from Bank B, we cannot issue a transmittal letter to Bank B for them to rely upon our report findings for their decision making. What is the solution? Well, there is a solution. The solution is that we have to create a new report. And so we create a new report, which is specifically written for Bank B. And here's the other thing is that USPAP also requires that every time we appraise equipment, we have to disclose whether it was appraised before, and we have to give those conditions. So we have given out appraisal reports to lenders, for example, in which we have disclosed that we've also appraised the same equipment for two other banks within the 30-day period before we created that report, and perhaps that we even appraised that equipment 2 or 3 years earlier for another lender, right? And so it's all disclosed in these reports in the interest of transparency. So thank you very much for learning with us about restricted appraisal reports and about the special conditions that they have. If you want to learn more about machinery and equipment appraisal, you should join our email list. When you sign up, you will receive a copy of the Essentials of Machinery and Equipment Appraisal, which is a guide that we put together that not only includes information about appraisals, but also strategies and case studies. So whether you're an entrepreneur or an advisor to small business, you will find this useful. You will get only one email every month whenever we release a new Lunch and Learn video to remind you that the new video is out, or if there's any kind of educational programs or live events somewhere in the region that you may want to come and meet us at. You can also find out more about machinery and equipment appraisals by going to our website and exploring our frequently asked question video library, which is all available to you over at BusinessAndAssetValues.com. And please, 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 if you have any questions, concerns, or thoughts, or anything you want to talk with about machinery and equipment appraisals or small business evaluations, and you'd like to talk with us, we're here for you. So you can find our contact information at businessandassetvalues.com or in the notes down below if you're watching this video on YouTube. Thanks. We'll see you next time.